It is now 7 o'clock.
We'll be ready to begin. Ms. Clark, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you, Phyllis. All right, I'd like to call to order this special meeting of the Urbana City Council. It's Monday, August 3rd, 2020. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Miss Wu,
Here.
Miss Hersey,
Here.
Mr. Brown,
Here.
Mr. Roberts,
Here.
Mr. Colebrook,
Here.
Mr. Miller,
Jared's joining us right now.
okay, thank you.
I'm here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here. I did want to announce that due to the Governor Pritzker's and the mayoral emergency COVID-19 orders, the Urbana City Council chambers are not open to the public during the meeting. Council members will meet remotely using the Zoom webinar, and the meeting can be watched on Urbana Public Television or via streaming services or attending via Zoom. We'll move next to public input. Is there anyone wishing to address the special meeting of the Urbana City Council? I see one hand. Amina Payne.
Hi, thanks, Mayor Marlin. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. My name's Amina Payne, and I'd like to address the connection between academic underachievement and student involvement in the justice system, as it needs to be highlighted and addressed. Now, when students are not engaged in their studies, nor when they graduate from high school to obtain the skills necessary to be contributors to their communities, they are more likely to be involved in the justice system. From my Freedom of Information Act request, I understand that in 2019, there were 252 juvenile arrests. 84% were Black youth. Now, the average age were kids on the cusp of turning 15 years old. And out of these 211 arrests of Black youth, only 5 were released with a warning. All others were sent to either a youth assessment center or a juvenile detention center. Now, time spent learning is the single best predictor of positive academic outcomes. Now, although federal within the schools, federal and state laws require educators to suspend, expel, or refer students to law enforcement for certain offenses, we know that many educators are choosing to employ these harsh measures for trivial matters, such as minor disturbances in the classroom. Now, Urbana School District 116, the chronic absenteeism percentage is 36% in comparison to that of the entire state of Illinois, which sits at 18%. At Urbana High School in particular, the rate of chronic absenteeism is 53%. Now, 88% of total suspensions in the 2019 school year were Black students and students of color. 89% of out-of-school suspensions are also Black students and students of color. Now, the exact percentages for Black students alone are 54% of total suspensions and 52% of out-of-school suspensions. But the student body breakdown of Urbana School District is 37% Black, 31% white, 15% Hispanic, 5% Asian, 1% American Indian, and 10% are multiracial. This further illustrates that Black students are being suspended at higher rates than their peers. So, as well as at Urbana schools, only 4% of Black students and 13% of Hispanic students meet or exceed mathematics performance levels. Yet, their white peers, 34% of them meet or exceed mathematics performance levels. Now, why am I talking to you about Urbana, the education system? It's because this is a community issue as well. And the Board of Education and the wider community leaders must refocus on students and their needs, not fund armed police in Urbana schools. As leaders, as community members, you must urge the Board of Education to end the intergovernmental agreement with the Urbana Police Department and remove SROs, school resource officers, from Urbana public schools as the Board of Education works to finalize their budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Nixon.
Hello, I just have a question, if I may, just for clarity. Is this the city council meeting at which the council is addressing the proposed appointments for the vacated city council seat?
Yes, that's the only item on the agenda.
Right, okay. I would like to offer a comment. So my name is Sarah Nixon. I'm a resident of Urbana, and as an Urbana resident who has become firmly engaged as an observer with the city government process, I'm disappointed that Mayor Marlin has shunned the most qualified and appropriate choice to replace retired council member Eric Jacobson. Mr. Jacobson's departure has provided Urbana with the ideal opportunity to inject city politics and government with a vitally needed force for real reform. As someone who has known Julie Laut well for many years, I can attest to the fact that she has wonderful qualities as a person, as a mother, as a church member, and as a community member. And I know that if appointed to city council, Julie will bring dedication and hard work to her role. However, the city has before it a choice between a really good candidate and a standout candidate. Never mind the city council appointment, Mr. Hansen has proven himself time and time again to be probably the most civically engaged resident of all of Urbana, who is not currently seated on a government board or commission. Beyond that, Mr. Hansen's renegade manner of agitating for reform is really exactly what Urbana needs to shake its government out of stagnation. As we all know, it is due effectively entirely to Mr. Hansen that Urbana is seeing a radical rebirthing of its civilian police review board that we all hope will be an effective resource for residents moving forward. His proven commitment and dedication to reforming broken parts of the city machine is really nothing short of exemplary. And I know that Mr. Hansen's engagement with city government will continue in one form or another. In closing, to Julie, if you are appointed, I would like to offer a couple of suggestions. First, I would encourage you to view all of the video recorded city council meetings and other relevant commission and board meetings, which, as if you haven't already done so, which, as you I'm sure know, have been recorded since the beginning of the COVID pandemic and made readily available on YouTube. And my final thoughts for you are, please don't be safe, don't be compliant, and don't go along to get along if appointed to the city council. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like Giselle Cruz.
Hello? Can you hear
Hello?
me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. My name is Jasan Gonzalez Cruz. I'm a resident of Urbana. And I just wanted to speak a little bit to policing alternatives. So when we say police are reactive, we mean they usually don't prevent crimes or dangers, but respond to them after the fact. A few months ago, actually, there was a man who was stopped for intoxication while driving in front of where I live, and 4 police officers responded to that call. There were 4 police officers giving him the intoxication test, which I think is a little intimidating for one, and probably unnecessary use of police resources for 2. And I'm immediately reminded of Rayshad Brooks, who was basically murdered after failing a sobriety test. So I think that there are other ways to respond to calls like that, and I want to suggest that maybe Urbana look into things like that, maybe doing some sort of community intervention strategies, numbers that the community can call, community members who would respond to things like that, because the man was arrested and it's just unfair. So that being said, I think Urbana is taking a lot of good steps to defund the police with the deferment of the K-9 police car, but they're small steps and there's a lot more that we can do. I understand that defunding the police is a slow process, but there's other strides that can be made. First off, Aaliyah Lewis was also approached for a police call citing domestic dispute. And that's another prime example of a time when police don't have to be the first responders. She shouldn't have charges against her, and taking seriously the community's call to defund the police means changing the way calls like domestic disputes and intoxicated driving are responding to. So I'd urge the public to call Julia Reitz at 217-384-3733 to demand that she drop the charges against Aaliyah Lewis. And I encourage the council to urge Julia Reitz to drop the charges against Aaliyah Lewis, as well as the 27 protesters who were arrested on May 31st and June 1st this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Meg?
Hi, it's Megan McDonald. I just wanted to say for the public, just to be more transparent, if anybody else is raising their hand to talk about police reform or defunding, just say stop until the next meeting. And also put in my recommendation for Chris Hansen again. Yeah, that's it. I'll just wait till the next meeting, but I just wanted people to know that because it seems like it might not be clear. All right.
Okay, I don't see any more hands up. We'll move on to the item of business for this meeting, and that is an appointment that I'm bringing to council for consideration for Ward 2. Just to summarize the process so that everyone understands, this is the same process for this appointment that was followed for appointing the council member in Ward 3 and in Ward 6. So this is the 3rd city council appointment that we've considered in the last 3 years. Applications were accepted, were made available to the public. We ended up with a total of 4 applications. 2 of the applicants did not live in the ward. That left the 2 remaining candidates. After the application period was over, I called all the references for both candidates and had personal interviews with both candidates, about an hour and a half each. The council members, city council members, received copies of the application and CVs if they were provided. And then last week, the candidates provided public statements at the city council meeting. This appointment, once again, is to fill out the remainder of Council Member Eric Jacobson's term, which ends May 3rd, 2021. And as such, the candidate will also take his seat on the Traffic Commission, which is the commission that Eric was assigned to for his term. I'm pleased to appoint Dr. Julie Laut to the position of Ward 2 City Council Member. Dr. Laut will complete the remainder of Eric Jacobson's term term. She's been a resident of Ward 2 for the past 8 years and holds a PhD in history from the University of Illinois at UIUC, a master's in history from Miami University, and a BA in history, a secondary education from the University of Colorado at Boulder. In addition to her professional credentials and her experience in outreach and development, Dr. Laut brings a wide variety of community-based volunteer experience to the position. She's demonstrated her ability to collaborate in an open and inclusive manner through her service on the Board of Trustees for the Unitarian Universalist Church. She hosts the Little Free Pantry at her home on Main Street, has raised thousands of dollars for local social service organizations during the pandemic. She's committed to achieving access and equity for all Urbana residents in terms of housing, food, education, transportation, technology, health, and safety. I believe that Dr. Laut will represent the interests of Ward 2 well, and that she will make significant positive contributions to all aspects of life in our community. So I am pleased to bring this appointment to you for this consideration, and I would appreciate a motion to get, in a second, to get the discussion on the table.
I'll move that we accept the mayoral's appointment for Ward 2 for Julie Laut.
I'll second.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Sharice. Any discussion? Jared?
I just wanted to make my thoughts known since council didn't get to talk to one another about this very much. I think that both candidates were very strong. I would have supported the nomination for either. Really would like to see Chris get a role somewhere in board or commission somewhere. I think he's proved his dedication to wanting to have a role in public service. But I would ultimately really like to welcome a third female voice to the council. And that was a large weighing factor for me, including all of Julie's connections and her statements and the things that she put in. So those are my thoughts.
Dennis?
Okay, so I believe, of course, both candidates are totally qualified for the position. I think I would have taken the gamble and had Christopher come forward to be on council. We're at a time right now where a lot of dimensional change is being requested of the city council to move forward out of traditional values and standards to something that's more embracing and transparent and all-inclusive. And we've heard a lot from Chris on these topics. Not really any comment before this nomination has come forward from Julia. And although I'm sure she'll fill the role if she retains the majority vote, I think I would have liked to have put Chris to real work and make him come to the council and actually put the wheel, his shoulder to the wheel, and assist the community in getting something changed in a democratic and judicious manner. So I haven't quite decided how I'm going to vote.
Any other comments? Mary Alice?
I don't know Julie very well, but I did want to just kind of give my background. Julie, my first interaction with her was when she organized the Radical Illini, which was kind of a reunion for the 1960s student movement at Urbana. And she did a really good job organizing that event, bringing in a lot of different people, both from across the world, but also local students, and getting the local students involved. I also know her a bit from her Trivia night that she does on Friday nights. And I would like to say that she does a really good job of outreach to all the different social organizations. Every Friday there's a presentation. She encourages people to donate to these organizations. And so I look forward to her insight and the work that she's done with all the different organizations in our community. And I think that that would bring a real asset to City Council.
Any further discussion? Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll? Do you want?
Okay, I'm here, but one of these days I'm going to get this thing to work right. Miss Wu,
Yes.
Miss Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
I think I'll respectfully pass.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Julie. And Julie will be sworn in person tomorrow at the city clerk's office. And after that, she will be then she will be seated on the council. So she'll take her seat next week on the Urbana City Council. And I'd like to thank Christopher Hansen for applying and for your demonstrated interest in the city. And with no further business before this special meeting, we are adjourned. We'll move right into the Committee of the Whole, which is chaired by Bill Brown tonight. Thank you.
Okay, is the clerk ready?
Yes,
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order, and could we have a roll call?
yes. Miss Wu,
Here.
Miss Hersey,
Here.
Mr. Brown,
Here.
Mr. Roberts,
Here.
Mr. Colebrook,
Here.
Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
Okay, first we have approval of the minutes from the previous meeting from July 20th, 2020 Committee of the Whole. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll make that motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
So moved by Dennis and seconded by Mary Alice. Any corrections? Seeing none, could we have a roll call?
Yes. Miss Wu,
Yes.
Miss Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
That
Is
motion-
that a
Oh, yes. I'm sorry.
yes?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
that motion carries. The minutes are approved. Are there any additions to the agenda? See no additions. Next is public input and presentations. Anyone who wishes to speak, please raise your hand.
Bill, can you tell people how to do that if they don't know?
Yeah. So I guess on yours, I'm not sure what you see on your screen, if it's the same as what I see, but if you have attendees visible, you first click on participants and you should see list of names, and then you might have to click on attendees, and there should be a raise your hand button at the bottom, I think.
The public won't actually see everything that you see, Bill. So what the public will want to do if they want to speak, there's just a raise your hand at the very bottom of the screen. That's kind of their only option, and they can click that raise their hand. I don't see anyone attending by phone tonight, but if someone were attending by phone to raise their hand, it would be *9. But again, for everyone on the call tonight, it's just raise your hand at the bottom.
Okay, so there's just a button at the bottom. Okay, first I see Meg. Oops.
Hello, can you? Hello, can you hear me?
Now we can, yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. All right. Dear Mayor Marlin and the rest of the City Council, my name is Megan McDonald. I'm from Ward 5, and we're quite acquainted by this point. I'll start out by saying how I didn't appreciate being interrupted last week and that it was unnecessary. Being told that Chief Seraphin was not at the WILL hosted role of police panel 2 Thursdays ago because he was on vacation. This fact could have waited. It also sparked even more curiosity in me. Mayor Marlin said this panel was rescheduled 4 times. Why was it not rescheduled a 5th time so the Urbana Chief of Police could be there? There was a protest by the community in response to Chief Seraphin being reappointed a few weeks ago, months ago at this point. Mayor Marlin and Chief Seraphin should be actively working towards building a transparent relationship and eager willingness to learn and listen with the community, which would have included rescheduling that panel. But so far, all we have seen is different variations of white silence, lackluster pushes for reform instead of what we're really asking for in our community, which is defunding the police and reinvestment of those millions upon millions of dollars in their budgets and pensions into actual solutions that haven't even been tried or tried with enough monetary support. Instead of these empty pushes for more of the same from a broken citizen police review board. I have been protesting outside Rogue Barber Co. night after morning after night. I'm sure you've heard and read about that already, about what's going on in Champaign. Vehicular assault and racism doesn't just live in Champaign. I have almost been hit by a motorcyclist at the Immigrants Are Welcome Here protest in Urbana. You will see no footage of it, but it happened, and there were witnesses and photographs of the aftermath. I am actively working on mutual aid, including food, money, clothes, and hygiene products for women that have been made more vulnerable by being held, brutalized, and defamed through a system the police would call criminal justice. Gun violence increases year after year, and so do the jail capacities, and so does the police budget, not just nationally, but right here in Urbana. Nothing is changing for the better, and yet you all keep saying, wait, 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 no, not like that, just give us more time, yada, yada. There are cities and places that are defunding and cutting ties with police. We can do that too, just maybe with a new mayor who isn't cop endorsed, but we can do it. I'm running myself ragged, making sure that these young women don't end up ripped from their families and lives just to be held in a violent system where so many Black women end up scarred, brutalized, or dead. Sandra Bland immediately comes to mind. So what are you doing, the council and those in the audience? Are you pushing for budget amendments besides this lackluster human resource officer? When are you taking the SROs out of Urbana schools? Are you investing in a shelter for people without homes in Urbana? When does the open door program start? Because we needed all of these things done yesterday, but you all kept voting for increase after increase in the police budget and more of the same, more of the same. Dennis, I'm really happy to hear that you want SROs out of schools and that you would have taken the gamble, as you said about Chris, and your vote reflected that. We need radical change, and I think you hear that. So please do something. Have you all taken the time to think more critically about the violence you're actively ignoring that is being inflicted upon Aaliyah Lewis and the people who were discriminatorily arrested on May 31st? Are you going to talk to Julia Reitz and advocate for the charges to be dropped? Are you going to publicize that Urbana is a town of understanding and acceptance and safety, not just for some, but for all? Jailing these young people makes no one safer. It brings more money and power to the police and the state. It could kill my friends who are awaiting trial. Drop the charges, defund the police. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Hansen.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Christopher Hansen. I've lived in Urbana for 18 years. We're talking about police reform a lot lately, and it was probably 2 months ago that Bill Brown suggested that the CPRB should start reviewing the Urbana police use of force policies. But as I have been pointing out for months, no one, including the city council members, are actually allowed to see the full police policies. When questioned about this a month ago, Chief Seraphin said that the CPRB and the city council members could surely have a full unredacted copy of the policies, but then that never happened. And then last week, when Seraphin was asked about releasing the policies again, he fumbled for words and referred to Jim Simon, who wasn't paying attention and got confused, and there was still no answer. And this is just getting really, really more and more embarrassing. In the position that we're in, for our police review board and our city council members, much less the public, to not have full access to our own police policies is insanely asinine. It's hard to put into words how absurd this is given the era we're in. So here's what I think you need to do. And the fact that this is necessary is altogether ridiculous. Create an ordinance that makes it required by law that the police policies will never be secret and will always be readily available to the council, the CPRB, and the public. Call a special meeting for Wednesday night. I personally volunteer to write the ordinance myself so that you don't have to ask staff to do it, and we'll just get this passed and get it done, and then we'll get the next thing done, and the next thing. And I don't know how else we're going to have progress if we just keep sitting around. And the next thing I want to ask is that, or suggest, is that you simply cancel the Hillard Heinz review. I think it's the right thing to do. The feedback I've heard so far is that the review is of very poor quality, really doesn't take any community feedback, and this is just going to be a waste of time and money. Just cancel the review, apologize to the public, engage any contingency you have to get some money back that we spent on that, and just tell the public that we're dedicated to something better, something at a higher quality level than whatever we're going to get out of this firm. And that we don't want to wait for their feedback. We want to start on police reform right now. That would be so much better for Urbana than to kind of sit around and pretend that this firm from Chicago is going to tell us something that we don't already know. So I think that would just be the right and respectful thing to do for the public. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tracy Chong.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, can you put up the timer? Okay. Hi, I'm Tracy Chong, resident of Urbana. At the last CPRB meeting, Mike Schossler from the Police Training Institute gave a use of force presentation and answered questions from board members and the public. Mr. Schossler acknowledged that it angers him and that what happened to George Floyd and Walter Scott was heart-wrenching. He then said that it is time to stop blaming police misconduct on a few bad apples, as it implies that it's not a general problem that needs to be addressed. However, what followed next was just mind-blowing. During the question and answer session, I described details of a violent arrest and asked for Mr. Schlosser's comments. His reply was that it is hard to imagine the scenario that I described happening in this area. He stressed that he didn't think that such violence would happen in this area and that he could see it happening in other cities. And he doesn't think that it is our culture of policing. He doesn't think our culture of policing is like that. And that the most disturbing thing that he said was that you don't have to worry about it at all. What is so mind-blowing is that the scenario I described was not a hypothetical situation, not a hypothetical scenario, but an actual violent arrest that happened in Urbana-Champaign a few years ago. Mr. Schlosser basically just delivered a rebranded version of the bad apples narrative. But instead of, oh, it's just a few bad cops, now he's saying that, oh, it's just not happening in our town here. Something is very wrong here. For some reason, the public, residents of Champaign County, have seen and documented police misconduct and spoken loud and clear about it. But when it comes to you guys, our elected leaders, the police command staff, instructors like Mr. Schlosser, all we hear from you guys is that it does not happen in our town. It's not our policing culture. Our officers are acting according to policy. There's no misconduct. We don't have to be concerned. It's not a problem we face here in town. At the same time, you condemn police brutality across the nation, saying how wrenching it is, how angry you feel, how wrong it is, and so on. But what about what is happening in our own backyard? Why do you refuse to acknowledge problems in our city? Why have police officers who murder, beat, assault residents of Urbana not been held accountable? You can hire as many outreach specialists, communication, PR experts as you want. You can form as many advisory committees as you want. You can do as much forward thinking as you want. You can outsource and pay $20,000 to a fancy consulting firm to look into police misconduct. What's the point? Sure, you as leaders can say that, yes, you took action, but nothing is going to change if you do not address the root problem of accountability. Nothing is going to change if you don't hold police officers accountable for their actions. Thank you.
Thank you. Aiden Watson Morris.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Hi, I'm Aidan Watson-Morris. I'm a resident in the Champaign-Urbana area, and I wanted to speak in support of those continuing to devote their time and energy to holding those in power accountable at these meetings. First, I want to reiterate to anyone listening that the charges against Miss Aaliyah Lewis, as well as the 27 protesters arrested in May and June, still need to be dropped, and anyone can call Julia Reitz to demand this at 217-384-3733. Secondly, I want to make sure that the discussion about police isn't over. The community has overwhelmingly and continues to overwhelmingly speak against the current funding for Urbana Police. The City Council did defer the purchase of a canine vehicle, as was mentioned, and that is something, but it is not the end, and it does not even resemble what is being asked for, which is especially worth considering as this council amends the city's budget. The Urbana Board of Education, for instance, is spending over $300,000 on school resource officers. That money is surely more than it would cost to train staff on restorative justice, hire more counselors who reflect the racial demographic makeup of schools, and invest in after-school interest-based programs. Instead, the current unwillingness to think about alternatives to policing is continuing to expose many to unnecessary risk and harm. The stakes here are high, and the Urbana City Council needs to start considering need-based alternatives to police in earnest. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Julie Watkins.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hello. My name is Julie Watkins. I am a resident of Urbana. I understand the council is considering hiring a human relations officer to help with the amount of complaints received by this Citizen Police Review Board. Is this going to be something who's working with the public about their complaints, or is that they're going to be there to push the police point of view? That sounds like you're just spending more money on police when other needs are unmet. I've been listening to public input for weeks. It's 3 months now. People are asking the same things over and over, and council is saying little or nothing. The council should be making a statement that charges against Aaliyah Lewis should be dropped. You've made brief responses about other issues, but about Aaliyah, well, maybe it's a lawyer advice. So, well, if you won't say it, I will say it, and other publicans will continue to say it. The state's attorney should drop the charges against Aaliyah Lewis and the 27 Memorial Day protesters. In Champaign recently, I saw a driver of a pickup truck use intimidation and force to get through protesters. He destroyed a bicycle, and I found out later he was wearing a thin blue line t-shirt. In Urbana, the government is continuing to support unnecessary and or out of proportion intimidation and force. For what? Prove it can? I think your intent is backfiring. Aaliyah Lewis is still under threat for being victimized. And the protesters face a future of life-threatening felonies. All of this is out of proportion. Even before this time of COVID, better social support was needed here in Urbana, not spending so much on police. Now it's even more imperative. Urbana taxpayers must be sending more funds to Washington than federal sends back to us in social support. Urbana politicians should be writing to demand our community's fair share rather than those tax monies being wasted in war and prisons and corporate welfare cheats. So a thank you to all the other public commenters, and thank you to the council for your consideration of these matters.
Okay, thank you. Ben Joslin.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, sure can.
Hello again, and yep. Want to talk about, I'm a resident of City of Urbana. I've been attending these for a minute. Last week, Mayor Marlin once again told the dozens of people who regularly attend these meetings asking for racial justice to be patient. She told us that change takes time. I want to take a moment to assure you that our continued presence here is not out of some delusion that change does not take time. 4 years ago, I was listening to and participating in city council discussion of 5 more police officers and $500,000 more in police spending. We came and regularly said this is not what our city needs. We talked about the reasons and the sort of increase in phone calls being around mental health issues. There was a huge discussion. People understood that the rise was in mental health needs. That's where money should go. Eric Jacobson said he would only vote for 2 more police officers. We did reduce the number of police officers from 5 to 2, but then the city quietly increased the funding by $1.5 million 2 years later, but that wasn't the point. At that time, they voted for 2 more police officers, and Eric Jacobson said, "I'll only vote for this measure if we also spend an equal amount of money in more mental health spending." That was 4 years ago. So the reason we continue to come back week after week is not because we don't understand that change takes time, but instead because we know that change takes time, and that if we step away, change won't happen at all. This pattern is not new or unique. Fannie Lou Hamer famously said to the DNC in 1964 that she was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Langston Hughes asked in his poem Harlem, "What happens to a dream deferred?" Martin Luther King Jr. wrote that justice too long delayed is justice denied. So we're not that we're in that good a company, but just so you know, justice work has been a system of pressure and time and effort for long periods of time, and that delay has been a tactic of systems of oppression for forever. Really, it's all pretty well summed up by the fact that you saw Elias get assaulted by our police and have not yet said as a body that you think that it was wrong. Some have made small statements that say that you wish that she doesn't see jail time, but the city as a whole has failed to bring a motion forward, to bring it to a vote, and to demand better. You are all the bosses of that police system, and you fail to hold them to account. When we watched the video of this young woman who hadn't done anything wrong and then was attacked by the police department, and now it's leading to an altercation that could cost her 12 to 24 years of her life. I want you to take a moment to think about the next 12 to 24 years of your life. Think about that for someone you love, and think about the loss of life that our city is responsible for. It is an injustice that cannot pass. So the denial of basic liberty from which joy and purpose can be derived, the Urbana police, yeah. So we will not wait for someone else, or as Chris Hansen was saying about the firm sort of telling us whether or not wrong or right or what happened was in code. We shouldn't have to wait for whether or not we think that some other body thinks what happened was right. The citizens have come to you week after week after week after week saying what happened was wrong, and you should be able to understand that and take action. If you want actual accolades for what you're doing, some steps include voting for a city on sending a request to the state's attorney that asks that you drop the charge against Lewis and the 27 protesters, admit that the police have been historically a body that upholds white supremacy in the nation and in this town, and state your intent to take the steps necessary. Get the SROs out of schools and reallocate millions of dollars to support the community. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Sarah Nixon.
My name is Sarah Nixon. I'm an Urbana resident. I have 3 comments for the council. As a full-time, unpaid advocate for justice system reform, I have been participating continuously in the city's governance meetings since early May 2020, often multiple times each week. And it is from that informed perspective that it gives me personal pleasure to congratulate Julie Lout on her appointment to the City Council. As I stated a few minutes ago, I know that she will roll up her sleeves and engage conscientiously in the work before her. And secondly, I'd like to applaud Mr. Roberts for his insightful endorsement of Christopher Hansen. I know that many in Urbana would agree with Mr. Roberts. The city of Urbana would benefit tremendously were Mr. Hansen assigned an opportunity to meaningfully serve in a formal capacity. My third comment and closing comment is to remind the city leadership that its continued public inaction on behalf of Aaliyah Lewis is utterly disgraceful. Intervention in the situation is more than appropriate. Urbana voters are looking to city leadership to take ethical action. The wrongful criminal charges, which serve only to protect racist policing, must be dropped, and the officers who engaged in that reckless and racist and violent and unethical misconduct, including alleged witness tampering, a criminal offense, must be held accountable. The community will not go silent on this, as you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Giovanna?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Giovanna Di Benedetto, resident of Urbana and community leader in the Silverwood area. Before I get started with an update, I have a few questions in regards to this is for everyone participating tonight, because I'd like you to have a better understanding as to where Silverwood residents and other communities like this are coming from. I'm going to talk fast so I can get through everything they gave me to go through, please. Have you ever lived in housing where the bugs were so bad that you stepped on them constantly? Where your children woke up daily filled with bug bites? Have you had to go hungry so that your children could eat despite being on food stamps? Did you ever have to run for cover because gunshots were being fired as you got out of the MTD bus? Have your children been woken up by gunfire or seen a man killed? This is what residents of Silverwood and other similar communities live like on a daily basis. We don't want you to feel sorry for us. We want you to understand. We want you to help us. We don't want your sympathy. We want you to see all of us, not just one of us. Let me say that again, every single one of us, because we deserve your help. This is not about one person, the things we're talking about, but the things that prevent and help people get out and change their lives. This is what matters. It's getting involved. We want to be worth it. Every member, every 300 units of just the apartments and the senior housing, I apologize, Steer Place. We want you to understand and we want your help. Over the last 4 years, Mayor Diane, we do want to thank you because you and your staff have worked with us. You've given us that helping hand. But as evidenced on July 27th with the murder of Richard Wright, we are far from done. You see, it doesn't matter why he was killed, and it doesn't matter the reasons. It matters that it happened and that we woke up to this. This last week, I met with Barbara Jones from the Rotary Club, and I shared with her the plans I'm sharing with you right now that we are currently working on going forward. The Silver Hearts will continue as long as we can, the monthly food deliveries that we've been doing. We are working on having a quote virtual prayer walk and meeting sometime next week, and we'll release those details as soon as we have them. And we're trying to work on an arrangement with a local landlord to have an apartment that would serve as an office on site. That will make it easier for myself and others to work in a central location, especially with me moving out of the neighborhood. We understand that these few things will not solve nor answer all of the problems overnight that we discussed last week. But we do believe it is an opportunity for a new start, to kickstart, to move forward and change the direction things are going in our communities. And in the millennials' words, we're using it as a reboot. Thank you for your time.
You're muted, Bill.
Thank you. Amina Payne.
Thank you. I won't repeat myself. I didn't realize that the earlier public input was for the seat, but I'm assuming that that will be included into the public input. I do want to read a couple of quotes from Urbana High School students and graduates. Now, on the topic of policing, a 2019 Urbana High School graduate has stated, "As a student, I'm intimidated by police, and I am less likely to try and take part in dialogue under police supervision because their presence says to me, if you make a mistake, there could be legal consequences." Another quote, "A police presence in schools does not promote understanding, tolerance, or peace, but instead impedes it." I also want to let the council and those who are listening know that the average starting salary for social workers in Illinois is about $45,000. So that intergovernmental agreement of $320,000 per year to pay for two SROs, two full-time SROs in the schools, could actually be used towards a minimum of 6 social workers to better support students and therefore improve the community relations between youth within the community. Now, the Board of Education is going to be voting on their budget on the intergovernmental agreement to have SROs in mid-September. So I would also encourage people to submit their public comment to the Board of Education at publiccomment@usd116.org. And I'll repeat that again. That's public comment at usd116.org. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm muting because I think Iron Post or somebody is playing music and it's coming through my window, so I didn't want to switch over to me. Next is Karen Medina. Karen, are you there? Karen, do you have your hand raised? Okay, let's go on and maybe come back. Jasan Gonzalez Cruz.
Sorry, can you hear us? Hello?
Yep, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Anne Marie Esposito, and I am a resident of Urbana. I'm calling today because, like many others in the community, I'm concerned about the languished attitude towards substantive change to the policing in this community. Earlier today, I attended a presentation by the Champaign Citizen Review Board, wherein they described numerous steps towards improving safety in the community. To list a few, the committee recommended negotiating the contract with the Illinois Fraternal Order of Police to ensure community oversight, defunding the police budget by 10% as a starting commitment to defund the police, a study to assess the benefit or lack thereof of SROs, and the prohibition of tear gas. Is the Council of Urbana coordinating with the Council of Champaign? Many community members in Urbana have made similar suggestions, but we are not seeing the same developments here in Champaign as it appears. Maybe one solution to building better safety infrastructure in Urbana is to work with our neighbors, not only to envision alternatives to policing, but also to establish them. And of course, I urge the council to pressure Julia Reitz to drop the charges against Aaliyah Lewis and the 27 protesters. I know that change can be hard to wrap your mind around, especially if you benefit from the system as I do, but I urge you to imagine what it would be like if you did not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kate Puppets.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, I'm Kate Popetz. I'm a resident in Ward 5. I'm just commenting to say that 2% cut to the police budget is not enough. I know you say that change takes time, but we have seen for years, as another commenter said, that no change has happened and the police continue to brutalize people and put people in jail just for being Black. Also, the student resource officers, we don't need people in schools who are going to intimidate students. We need social workers in schools, and as the previous commenter said, it takes a lot less money to employ social workers than it does to employ armed officers to walk around school and intimidate people. So I would like to see some response to these things a little bit sooner than has happened. I know that it takes time, but again, we're tired of hearing the same responses from you guys, and we're tired of seeing only a few people show up to these city council meetings on the city council side of things. Thank you everyone else who showed up. And yeah, and I just want to add that I would like very much if all of you would reach out to Julia Reese and ask her to drop the charges against Aaliyah Lewis and the 27 protesters from Memorial Day. It's really not fair to put charges against someone who the police beat for no reason. And I don't understand how you can do that in good conscience and how you can let that slide and think that you're doing something good for this city. I appreciate that you are trying to do a good thing for the city, but it's time for you to step up and try to make actual change, no matter how uncomfortable it is, no matter how many friends you have who are police officers. You need to do something, because there are people who are starving and living in terrible conditions, and you're not seeing that, and you're just giving a third of the police, or the third of the city budget to the police, which is absolutely ridiculous. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands up. We did get email. Are we not reading email now? We're just including that in the minutes?
Usually list who sent email. We read off the names and then submit it to the.
Okay. And then actually Daryl Cruz isn't able to participate verbally, so we might read his, do you think?
I would say yes.
Okay. Let's see if I can bring it up.
And there is a hand that's up, Bill.
Oh, is there? Okay, we have one more hand up. Maria Arnellis.
Hi, can you hear me? Oh, I can.
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Maria. I am a new resident of Urbana, and I just wanted to thank everyone, all the participants who came to participate in the City Council meeting. As another participant echoed, I wish more members of City Council would have showed up to the meeting. I just wanted to kind of echo everything that everyone else has said. I think it's time that we hold our representatives and our politicians accountable for making change that they always talk about but never take any action on. I think I am looking forward to, in my years here, to see change slowly happen, and I am just really excited to see everyone get involved more in politics, and I'm hoping to see you all as leaders of the community actually take into account what everyone has been saying and really use that to harness your power to make change in the community that everyone is asking for. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you everyone again for participating.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, I've got Daryl's comments up.
Okay, yeah, for some reason all I'm getting is the one he sent last week. I don't see the one from this week. Do you want to read that, Jared? He's in your ward.
I'd be happy to.
Okay, thanks.
This is a letter from Daryl Cruz. And just for record, we did get Karen Medina's email too, since she just said her mic wasn't able to work, so she sent her comments. All right, so this is from Daryl Cruz. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I find it interesting that you are voting tonight on a resolution entitled Social Equity and Justice in Urbana's Sustainability Framework. It seems like an appropriate and timely resolution for you to support. But I must ask you why you haven't considered a similar council resolution to reduce traffic stop racial disparities. The approved 2018 to 2021 council and mayor priorities list priority number 3, achieve equity in traffic stops, is one of the 6 priorities. And he included the priorities as an attachment. It seems racial equity in traffic stops is just as, or even more important as sustainability equity. Therefore, I ask you to act on your list of highest priorities and vote during agenda item policing next steps tonight to begin the process of developing a suitable, necessary, and long overdue council resolution regarding traffic stop racial disparities. A draft resolution is attached. Possibly titling it Policing Changes to Improve Equity in Traffic Stop Practices and Tactics. Now to address the upcoming 2019 annual traffic stop report. It is time for the inclusion of the 2019 report. In the 2019 report, the following changes and additions. These changes should be requested of the UPD tonight, so they are alerted in a timely manner, and so you are assured they will be incorporated into the upcoming report. And then he has 4 points. 1, Section 2, benchmarks. Must include a thorough explanation of the new method the state used to produce Urbana's 2019 traffic report. Since a totally new method is used, it is worthy of public discussion and knowledge. The UPD report should include the state's findings for Urbana, and UPD opinions or preferences should play no role in factually reporting the state data to the public. Number 2, direct the UPD to stop using all drivers, ticketed and non-ticketed, in accidents to determine the local ratio. Nowhere has this criterion been recommended as a reliable statistical method to determine the racial makeup of the driving public. The UPD must use only not at fault accident data, namely the race of the non-ticketed driver, to maintain the randomness and integrity of the mathematical process. The UPD seems to have picked the all driver method with no documented support or proof that it is reliable. This method seems to statistically make it look as if progress in reducing racial disparities is being made when it is actually not. If the UPD believes this approach is mathematically sound, ask for the evidence that confirms it. Section 2 and 2.1 in the 2019 report should reflect the above method change and resulting data updates. Number 3, on page 13 of the April 1, 2018 report, it stated, as of January 1st, 2018, tickets that indicate questioning beyond the scope of the traffic stop now denote this in the electronic record. This data will be presented at the City Council meeting on April 22nd, 2019. I am not aware of the UPD keeping its commitment to reporting on April 22nd, 2019. Am I wrong? If not, closer monitoring and vigilance is clearly needed by the Council. Be sure that the UPD follows through by adding this new data in its next report, because it goes to the heart of the nature of pretextual stops. Number 4, finally, I encourage you to require the UPD to add more detailed information regarding residency and stops, namely to include race percentages, and he has an attachment about that as well. This data provides some interesting insights into how local and non-local residents are stopped differently by race. How is it that local blacks are stopped 16% higher than local whites and more than non-resident blacks? Residency data is enlightening and warrants much more discussion. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, thanks. So I have, I'll read the names of the people that sent email. Karen Medina, Grace Walworth, Creel Lancaster or Creel Unbeloved, Kate Popetz, Megan Miracle, Mike Thiessen on video gaming terminals, John Hayes, Christine Janet, Hannah Perhai, Sandra Hannum, Daryl Cruz, and then over the weekend, John Arnold on Indigenous Peoples Day and Megan Brunning on replacing Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day.
There was one hand that just went up, Bill.
And I think that's it for email. If anybody sees one I missed, let me know.
There is one hand that went up, Bill.
Grace Wilkin.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I also had the email, Grace Walworth / Grace Wilkin, but I would read it out loud too, if that's all right.
Sure.
Thank you. So again, Grace Wilkin, I'm an Urbana resident, and I'm contacting you as a concerned citizen about the following issues. I ask that you keep an open mind and compassionate heart when considering issues that impact our community. I ask that you contact Julie Reitz to request that the charges be dropped against Aaliyah Lewis and the 27 protesters. These incidents of police interaction with Aaliyah Lewis and protesters, though very distinct, are both examples of abuse of power and oppressive racism in our justice system. Please reconsider how our tax dollars are distributed. I request that we seriously reduce funding to the police department and instead use those funds to rebuild healthy, resilient, inclusive, and peaceful communities. I ask that you request the county probation office to stop voluntarily giving citizenship status information to ICE. I talked about this in an earlier comment, and I have yet to follow up. After some research, I do correct my previous statement and correct it to say that the Urbana police are not cooperating directly with ICE. However, they are not enforcing jurisdiction with ICE because the local police are not notified of ICE activity. This has resulted in people being taken into ICE custody while the local police and their family are looking for a missing person. However, the county probation office is voluntarily giving citizenship status information to ICE, which has resulted in persons being taken into custody after leaving the courthouse. I also ask that we remove RSOs from schools as they are not effective or helpful. Again, I ask that you truly listen to our public input with an open mind and make decisions that will benefit the communities that you represent and serve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And that should conclude public input.
Bill, there was one from a Brianna Lawrence that was signed by a number of people on pedestrian streets.
Oh, okay. Pedestrian streets. Yeah, I didn't go back far enough.
It was sent on Friday.
Okay, I see. Brianna Lawrence, co-signed by Brian Gaines, Jennifer Straub, Gabriel Nardi, Aman Alaka, Melissa Shopline, Daniel McDonald, Wendy Mathewson, Casey Smith, Elizabeth Freefogel, Benjamin Leff, Meg Freefogel, and Sanjay Patel. Any others? Oh, there was one on Thursday from Casey Gastanga. I think that was probably, oh, and maybe from Annie Adams, Cafe Streets Help Out Businesses. Actually, it says no need to respond. So I think that was probably it that was meant for public input. Okay, let's move on to the agenda. Next is staff report. We have a CDBG update on the coronavirus program, and I think Chief Seraphin had an update. Who wants to go first? Go ahead, Lori.
All right, I'm going to kick it over to Sheila. While she's getting ready, I'm going to share a screen so that you have a table in front of you.
Good evening. The City of Urbana receives CDBG COVID funds through the CARES Act in the amount of $294,600. After assessing community needs, 2 programs were adopted by City Council to assist those impacted by COVID-19. Funds are to be used by the City of Urbana as required by HUD. The Small Business Grant Program was designed to assist small businesses with 15 or fewer full-time equivalent employees. Funds could be used for retooling to help with social distancing requirements, operating capital, payroll, etc. Urbana received approximately 37 applications for small business assistance, totaling over $321,000. The first application was received on June 19th, and the last one was received on July 16th. The budget for this program was $250,000 in CARES Act funding. The grant program review team consisted of staff from Human Resources Finance, the Executive Department, Economic Development, and Grants. The team set priorities for funding as follows: minority and women-owned businesses, businesses who would be retaining the greatest number of employees, businesses with a brick and mortar building in Urbana, and for-profit businesses. Funding was limited to for-profit businesses as there were other local funds available in the community for nonprofits. After a review of all applications, 28 were recommended for funding, of which 16 were minority-owned and 7 women-owned businesses. A total of 122 jobs will be retained by funding the agencies you see on your screen. 9 businesses were denied funding. 2 of those businesses were located in the city of Champaign. 1 business application was incomplete. 3 businesses were denied as they were nonprofit businesses. 2 businesses were home-based who were allowed to continue through the pandemic. And the final business was incorporated in January of 2020 and registered as a business in June of 2020. Being in business less than 3 months before the state stay-at-home order was issued, the business did not have the financial history of profit loss statements required by the grant. Housing Assistance Program was designed to offer rent and mortgage assistance to those impacted by COVID-19. The Housing Assistance Program has received 30 applications, of which 4 were denied as the units were outside the city limits. 7 of the applications have been funded, and the remaining 19 are in the review process. As outlined in the COVID-19 program manual adopted by Council, home funds may be used for rent assistance for COVID relief as well. In August, staff will be bringing a request to Council to reallocate unexpended prior year funds towards the rent assistance program. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, Mary Alice.
Do you know how many individuals the rental assistance program was able to help? How many people or families?
So far, 7 families. I did not break it down by people, but as we continue, I can do that for you.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Hmm?
Sheila, is this list of businesses available online?
No, it can be.
Yeah, if you could make it available online, that would
Sure.
be great. Any other questions for Sheila? Jared?
Could we also get a list like this with the ones who were turned down for funding, and instead of COVID impact, maybe an additional column for the reason for denial?
Sure.
Thanks.
Do you want that to be public as well? I could add it to this same list.
Sure.
Okay.
Sheila, as far as the rental assistance goes, I know I put out some information on a couple of neighborhood lists about it. Do you feel like, I mean, is there even if 19 of those, all 19 of those in process are approved, is there still money remaining, or will the 19 and the 7 pretty much make up what we had available?
Yeah, it will be very close, Bill. I'll do an accounting when I get the final ones in. However, we could come back to council with us being in quarantine. Some of our other programs we're not able to do. So if we feel like there's a need for more assistance as the pandemic continues, we may be able to reallocate some additional funds to rental and housing assistance.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Okay, thanks. Oh, I'm sorry, Sharice.
That's okay. I guess my question is also considering we seem to be having a resurgence of the virus nationwide. Is there any chance, or do you have any opinion or knowledge regarding whether or not there might be another assistance program coming through?
I'm not sure. Their CARES Act 4 funding is being discussed at the Senate right now. And funding for local governments is a part of that discussion, but I haven't seen detail whether that's to assist the local government with the impact of, not receiving sales tax, or whether it's to be released back out like the CDBG funding was.
Okay, I was just hoping you might have some more insight into it other than what we see on the news every day.
Yeah, unfortunately I do not, although there is a lot of, fortunately, a lot of assistance for rental in the community right now, because we've got emergency solutions grant of almost $700,000 that's going to be awarded in the next month. And then between the county, Champaign and Urbana, and both townships, we have $375,000 that's available to the community as well. So thankfully, we have that assistance to help.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. And I guess a lot of it will depend on what happens with unemployment and things like that too.
Diane has her hands up.
Yeah.
Mayor?
I could add a little bit to the question about funding. We heard from the U.S. Conference of Mayors today. The negotiations in Congress, both the Republicans and Democrats, are pretty far apart as far as direct assistance to local governments. And at this point, there's zero in the hopper for local governments as far as from the Republican side of things. So unless they can compromise somehow, it doesn't look good for local government funding yet, but it's not over. So people who want to, people can contact their elected congressional representatives and senators to ask them to pressure their, to get funding for local governments included in the next aid package. That would be money sent directly to cities to make up for revenues lost, which means, we would be able to help more people and fund more programs, services, and basic functions. But it doesn't look good at this point.
Okay, thanks. Reese.
Mayor, I guess a question that I might have too is that if we get, if we are able to get funding, let's just, put that hypothetical out there. If we get funding, will this, because there are some, businesses that are open and can be open. That's saying that they are capable of even being able to remain that way on a limited basis. Would they also be able to get assistance?
Well, this is money that would go to the city to help us pay bills, which directly assists all businesses and all people in the city of Urbana. There's quite a bit of actually assistance probably coming toward for businesses from this, but it's just they still have not included funds that would come directly to local governments to offset lost revenue, which is what we use for our general fund to pay bills and keep things going.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Sheila, and thank you, Lori. Is Bryant, did you have an update?
I do. So I have two things tonight that I wanted to update you on. One had to do with some information regarding an event at Lincoln University as part of a protest that was going on that night of June 23rd. And obviously there's been other events that have occurred similar, but this one tonight I just wanted to mention with regards to June 23rd. Because this had come up, I think, in some public input. Urbana police were called at about 8:42 p.m. that night. And there had been multiple calls that had come in. Some were saying that a car had struck protesters. There was calls from the other side, if you will, that were discussing protesters damaging cars. And so when the police arrived, they estimated the crowd at about 150 people. And it was, I guess, needless to say, a tense situation. Ultimately, it appeared as though a car driven by an older female who'd been at a nearby hospital had tried to go around some of the protesters, essentially turning at the intersection of University and Lincoln from traveling west to north. And as this woman was doing so, her car did come into contact with a couple of 18-year-old protesters who had been out, and so it had hit them. I contacted them in their legs, and I say contact because everyone on site who would provide information said the car was going very slowly. As a matter of fact, the driver guessed she was going 1 mile an hour with their foot on the brake. Both of the ladies were spoken to by the Urbana police. Both denied any injuries and did not want any assistance, and they wanted to continue about the protest. The officers there were able to get this older woman on her way and out of that particular area, and then the officers stayed by and sort of stood by while the protest concluded, and I think it went up and finished at King Park that night. One of the other things that had come up in this discussion was that there was the officers, none of them were wearing any masks. We actually did a quick body cam review, discovered 5 of the 6 officers were wearing their masks right out of the car. 1 did not, and as a matter of fact, evidently a protester handed that officer, here's a mask, and the officer put it on. So I was glad to see that. So that I think was sort of the backstory, the other half of that situation. If anybody had any questions on that, I can try to answer them. Otherwise, there's one other thing I wanted to update the council on.
Any questions for Chief Surfin on that, Jared?
Chief, I'm just curious as to traffic law, and these are obviously a different situation than folks have been used to, but it's coming quite a common occurrence in our town, and I would obviously say rightfully so. But what would you advise, or what did officers have to say to this woman who decided that despite her way being blocked, she was still going to push her vehicle through the people who were in her way? Is she allowed to do that? Are people just allowed to push through protesters who stand in the street in front of them?
Yeah. No, we don't want people driving over protesters. We also don't want protesters jumping on hoods of cars. This woman actually said that there were 5 different protesters who stood up and jumped up onto her vehicle. So I don't think we want either of those 2 situations. With regards to this particular event, I think what they were simply trying to do was get this woman out of there. Like I said, I believe that she was perhaps a bit frazzled by spending, evidently she was at a local intensive care unit with a loved one. And so unfortunately, in this case, we'd like to avoid these from both sides.
Okay, but if people are driving their vehicles and they come across a protest and people are blocking a street, they should not attempt to drive through people. There are no laws protecting drivers from driving their vehicles through people in the streets.
We do not want anyone driving through, correct. One other thing, and this had come up, I was asked about this last week with regards to some of the body camera, the presentation that had been, I think, pushed up about 3 weeks ago when we did that. Those 20 slides are on the city's website now, with a link to the presentation that was given that night. I will say, in that particular format, as was discussed, the FOIA sort of flow chart from left to right is at least legible. But I do know that staff has been asked to do a couple things. We want to redo that and see if there's someone who's better at computers than maybe some police staff are, to see if we can get a better graphic, number one. And then number two, we've had one of our light duty officers sit back and watch that program and cobble together, and I think there were over 20 questions that were asked by council, to use that to try to distill those down into maybe clusters and to create a document that might be the top 6 or 7 most frequently asked questions when it with regards to that. So our goal is to have that done by the current material is up now, and I think that other document is the goal is to have that up by September 1st. So we have a few weeks to put, 3 weeks to put that together so that it's meaningful and accurate.
So the presentation you're talking about is the one that's currently under the Committee of the Whole meeting information for July 20th. It's called FOIA presentation.
If I thought it was 13th off the top of my head, but if you're looking at it, Bill, I will say that yours, yeah. So that's the presentation that's linked. Yes.
Okay, and it's under the City Council meeting, not on the police page.
No, it should be. They should have gone through. I think if you go through the police department body cams, you will find the slides inclusive of the FOIA graphic as it is, and then there will also be a link there as well to the council. So I suppose, I'm assuming it goes to the same source material.
Okay. Jared?
Chief, when you guys get ready to post those 5 or 6 FAQs, would you mind sharing them with me ahead of time so I can offer if there was something I think might be useful that was missed, or just take a gander at it so we don't have to come back to it after you've already got it up on the website?
I don't have any problem sharing that with all the council beforehand and make sure that we haven't missed one obvious one. Again, we're using the material, the questions from that night as sort of the guiding plan for that. But yeah, any extra stuff is fine.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions for the chief? One more, Jared.
Sorry, just one more about, we had asked last week and week before, and I still haven't heard whether or not we're going to got an answer on the policies and unredacted versus redacted. Where are we at with that?
Sure. With regards to that, this afternoon was our first police meeting, and I heard Mr. Hansen tonight earlier, and I do understand the idea of sometimes what seems to be the glacial pace at which things work, this slow process. There are 20 of the 163 policies, 26 of those policies had redacted material. We have gone through 2/3 of those this afternoon, which took a couple of hours to make our recommendations, and those will go to legal for final approval, those 2/3. I know the remaining 1/3 had a few things that we're going to have to sit down and spend again more time on. Those are things like barricade hostage scenarios, bomb threats, and some of the SWAT team activation. Some of those policies clearly have more sensitive information that we're going to sit down with someone else in the room with us, somebody from legal, to actually I want to sort through that in a more efficient way. So I guess my response, Jared, is we're getting there, and we got 2/3 moved down the assembly line this afternoon to the next phase.
Okay, I appreciate the update.
Okay, thanks. So first on the agenda is resolution number 2020-08-034R, a resolution approving a Champaign-Urbana solid waste disposal system agreement. Public Works, I think Scott Tess. There he is.
Good evening, Council. This is a renewal and an extension of our longstanding relationship with the City of Champaign, whereby we collectively manage a portion of the city's closed landfill. We call that portion the Champaign-Urbana Solid Waste Disposal System. In law, it's a joint action agency. There are a few minor changes to the agreement, which I've noted in the memo, but it is essentially an extension. And I'll take any questions you may have.
Mary Alice?
Thank you, Scott, for this memo. I had a question. It says that the City of Urbana pays for this out of the general fund, which provides 50% of the funding. I'm assuming that the second 50% comes from the City of Champaign.
Exactly.
And then that the U of I provides a 20% reimbursement for the past fiscal year expenditures. And I'm assuming that's not 20% of Urbana's share. It's 10% of Urbana's share. Is that
Exactly.
right? So,
correct.
Okay, so that means that we're paying approximately $20,000 to $24,000 a year is Urbana's share for that.
Yes, correct.
And then I also noticed that this is something that started in the early 2000s, right? When was the first? Well, I guess 1975. I'm sorry. This started in 1975. This is a 20-year extension.
Correct.
Is this the first time that we've extended it so that it was 25, 35, 45-year agreement?
Well, the previous agreement was a 30-year agreement. I haven't seen, no, I guess maybe, no, I think it was a 45-year agreement. Yeah, I think that's correct. Because I think this is the only, I can't remember this if this was the only agreement, the first and only so far, or if there was an earlier, shorter one and an update. I'd have to go back into the files to find that. Just out of an interest in limiting the number of years we're committing to, and also getting us in a position where we're thinking about the end of our solar leases while we're also thinking about the renewal of the next system agreement. So lining those up just a little bit.
And then the second piece I was curious about was that most of the changes in here require a unanimous vote of the board. And I'm wondering if there's been any time in the past 45 years, to the best of your knowledge, I realize you haven't been here for 45 years, that there was a disagreement. Because I guess I was surprised that it required a unanimous vote.
It's a unanimous vote because there's only two board members. It's a representative from the City of Urbana and a representative from the City of Champaign.
Okay.
It is the city administrator for Urbana and the city manager for Champaign.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do in case of a tie vote?
It's never come up.
I guess it wouldn't pass. You need a majority to pass. So if one person supported it, it wouldn't pass.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions about the solid waste agreement? If not, is there a motion? What do you want to do with this?
There is a resolution in the back.
Yeah. Okay. Is there a council motion? Mary Alice.
I'll move that we move forward to the City Council with a recommendation for approval. Resolution number 2020-08-034 resolution, a resolution approving a Champaign-Urbana solid waste disposal system agreement.
I'll second that.
Been moved by Mary Alice and seconded by Dennis to forward to City Council with recommendation for approval. Is there any further discussion? If not, could the clerk, oh, Sharice, you're muted.
I just have one question for Scott. In the agreement, it's going to be an extended 20 years. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So what happens if the landfill, or what movement would we make should the landfill fill up before that 20 years?
So this is a closed landfill. It's not taking garbage anymore. So
Okay.
all we're doing is monitoring and maintenance and minor repairs.
Okay. I just wanted to understand that. Okay, thanks.
Dennis?
Yes, in the past, the city actually had to do some remediation when some leachate material was seeping out of the landfill and potentially could have gone into the creek. And the city had to work to build a retaining hump or wall a little bit, and to redirect some of the leachate and collect it, and basically kind of stop that leaking process. So once in a while, the old landfill does have a problem, and the city is responsible for maintaining it to keep the ecological health of the community.
That's absolutely correct. In looking at the records, it looked like it was over $1 million to repair that.
Thanks.
So we have a motion on the floor to send to City Council with recommendation for approval. Could the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
That motion carries. Thanks. Scott, while you're here, are you still here? Oh, there you are. Did you want to say anything about the solar contract? Is there information for people to sign up for the inexpensive solar power yet?
Yes, we've started marketing subscriptions for the community solar array that is going to be on top of both the Champaign-Urbana solid waste disposal system landfill and the portion of the landfill that is exclusively Urbana's obligation. So there's information on Facebook, website, and also an email went out from the city accounts sometime in the last couple hours while we're on this council meeting that includes information about those subscriptions as well.
Okay, so we'll look for that and get the word out.
Can I ask a question?
Dennis.
Scott, are you still there?
Yes.
Does the city, I can't remember this detail, does the city have an insurance policy that helps cover leaks from the landfill? Because you indicated that it was expensive fix the last time we did it. Do we have insurance that helps us cover those costs?
I'm gonna refer to Attorney Jim Simon.
Jim should have said no.
We do not. The environmental insurance is extremely expensive. However, the landfill, as you know, was closed decades ago before the EPA and the Illinois EPA regulations were as robust as they are now. But it was closed and it's being maintained consistent with the systems and Urbana's obligation to maintain the landfill.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Next is resolution number 2020-08-035R, a resolution authorizing acceptance of a grant for Market at the Square, Farm Credit Illinois Grant, SNAP Double Value Program 2020. Stephanie.
Yep. Good evening, everybody. This is just another grant for the SNAP match at the farmers market. This one is from Farm Credit Illinois. It's a $5,000 grant. The money has been received, and This year, the market staff is tracking the use of this grant separate from the link grant that I brought you a few weeks ago. This grant could be used for a broader use of food items, including packaged foods and baked goods at the market. So these tokens or coupons are actually already used up, but we need to go ahead and request approval of this resolution to make it official.
Any questions on that?
I thought I'd offer to make the resolution,
Okay.
to put it on the floor. So concerning resolution number 2020-08-035R, a resolution authorizing acceptance of the grant for Market at the Square, the Farm Credit Illinois Grant SNAP Double Value Program for 2020. I move that we approve it and send it forward to City Council.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Been moved by Dennis and seconded by Jared to send resolution to City Council with a recommendation for approval. Any further discussion? If not, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
That motion carries. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next is resolution number 2020-08-036R, a resolution approving amendment number 1 to a sub-grantee agreement for a tenant-based rental assistance program, Courage Connection TBRA FY 2017-2018, number 1718-CC01, Community Development. Sheila?
Sure. In 2017, the City of Urbana entered into a subrecipient agreement with Courage Connection to administer a tenant-based rental assistance program. This program is a subsidy that helps individual households afford housing rent costs, such as rent and security deposit. Rent assistance is paid directly to the landlord on behalf of the tenant. Courage Connection requires the tenant to pay 30% of their income towards the rent, and the balance is paid by the home funds. Tenant-based rental assistance is usually a 2-year program while the client is in transition. Courage Connection also requires a self-sufficiency component with their clients. Clients may be working on credit counseling and coaching, job training, GED schooling, higher education, etc., to meet the needs of the individual family. The goal is to have the family self-sufficient at the end of their rent assistance period. The grant awarded Courage Connection $150,000 in home funds, of which they have spent $95,000. Extending the timeline of the grant will allow them to complete their obligation to 9 families currently in homes as a result of the program, as well as to help house 2 additional victims of domestic abuse for the remainder of the new grant term. All funds are used for rent assistance and program costs such as unit inspections. No additional funds are being requested. Courage Connection is requesting an extension of time to complete the grant. Due to budget constraints at the state and loss of their executive director, the program was slow to start. This extension will allow more time for completion, but not additional funds. To date, Courage Connection has assisted 18 households consisting of 19 adults and 26 children with the program.
Okay, thanks. Are there any questions? Sharice?
So Sheila, this program specifically helps persons that are transitioning out of one abode to become self-sufficient based on domestic violence, or are there other issues that it also deals with?
The priority is given to those suffering from domestic violence. There are other tenant-based rental assistance programs in the county that are open to others.
Okay. And this is an Urbana run program, not it's not a Champaign County.
No, it is consortium wide, which is Champaign, Urbana, and unincorporated Champaign County. It's that pot of money that serves that area.
Oh, okay.
Mary Alice.
So Sheila, does that mean that Urbana is running this fund? Is that why it's here today?
Yes, we administer this. We administer the home program.
So we're the lead administrator for CDBG funds, and home, is home part of CDBG funds?
No, they're two separate pots of money. Each community gets their own community development block grant money. But at the time that the home funds were created, neither community was big enough to get their own entitlement. So they entered into a consortia that allows us to have access to these funds.
I'm happy to make a motion, Bill.
Okay.
I will move with a recommendation for approval to City Council, resolution number 2020-08036R, a resolution approving an amendment, number 1, to a sub-guarantee agreement for a tenant-based rental assistant program for Kurds Connection. Do I need
second?
TBRA fiscal year 2017-2018, number 1718 CC01.
Sorry, I second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mary Alice and seconded by Sharice to send resolution 2020-08036R to City Council with a recommendation for approval. Is there any further discussion? If not, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you. Next is resolution number 2020-08-037R, a resolution accepting a Tornado Trees for Tree Towns grant from Rotary Club of Urbana. Mayor Marlin. You're muted.
Thank you, Bill. As you recall, last May, South Urbana was hit by an F1 tornado. Our act of nature last year that we're dealing with. So a total of 64 public trees were destroyed and another 89 public trees were damaged. So these are trees that were on the public right of way. And the trees that we lost were valued in excess of $14,000. So the Rotary Club of Urbana, of which I'm a proud member, applied for a grant from Rotary District 6490 and were awarded a grant for helping to replant and replace the trees. And $5,000 is being offered to the city of Urbana for this purpose. And so this money will be used to plant trees, and not all of the trees will be planted back in South Urbana. One of the things we want to do is start to look at the entire community and make sure we're putting trees in all areas of the community, particularly those that have been underserved in the past or haven't had as many trees planted in the past. So this is, if you will, this is another way to look at equity, make sure we're providing a urban forest and the canopy to all areas of the community. So every tree that's planted will be recognized in our tree inventory and database as being donated by the Rotary Club of Urbana.
Okay, thanks. Any questions?
And this was done under the leadership of Rotary President last year, which was Celeste Schote, and she worked very closely with Tim Bartlett from the Urbana Park District and Kevin Sanderson from the City of Urbana.
Okay, thanks. Mary Alice?
I was surprised that 64 trees basically were valued at $14,000. It's just a little bit more than $200 a tree. I would assume that trees would be valued at a higher cost than that. Is that the estimate of what it would cost to replace 64 trees?
That, I believe that's the cost to plant new ones. I don't think it's the value of the of the full-grown tree, but I could be wrong.
I guess I would just be surprised if it cost, if the value of the trees is about $200. But regardless, there's two things in this grant. One is to rebuild the urban forest, and the second one is to provide education and outreach to the greater community. So I was wondering what your thoughts were on what education and outreach were going to be provided.
At this point, that usually is related to Arbor Day, and that's part of one of the requirements to be a tree city. So a lot of the education and outreach occurs around Arbor Day or that week.
Okay, and do you know how many trees that are we gonna attempt to replant 64 trees in all of Urbana with the $5,000?
I don't know the number tonight, but I can get that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Jared?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I'll move that we send resolution number 2020-08-037, a resolution accepting a tornado trees for Tree Town grant from Rotary Club of Urbana forward to the full council with recommendation for approval.
I'll second it.
It's moved by Jared and seconded by Bill Colebrook to send resolution 2020-08-037R to City Council with a recommendation for approval. Any discussion? If not, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you. The last ordinance is number 2020-08-041, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, budget amendment number 1, omnibus finance.
So this is, I know you feel like you just approved the budget, but we're starting to amend it already, and this will happen a number of times throughout the year. In this budget amendment, probably the most significant thing here is the recommended increase in the human relations officer position to bring that back to full-time. Historically, it had been full-time, and then for several years it was filled on a part-time basis. But as you may know, Vasilia Clark, who was in this position for the last few years, has ended her time with the city. So that's probably that's the single most significant item here. You'll also notice that we are increasing the budget for hearings for the Civilian Police Review Board, and that's because we have normally in the past had sometimes no hearings, sometimes one hearing. At this point, we have, well, and this is about a week and a half old now, but at that point, we had appeals already on 28 complaints. And those will likely be grouped together for purposes of the hearings, but 10,000 may not be enough to get us through this year. There is also a move in finance from a personnel line to a temporary services line that's related to a vacant position and just needing to kind of fill that spot on a temporary basis. And pretty much everything else in here is either a rebudget because of timing, something that was in the budget for last fiscal year that just didn't get completed, now needs to be moved into the current fiscal year. So there's a number of those items in the vehicle and equipment replacement fund, and a notable item in the IT fund is for timekeeping software.
Okay, questions for Elizabeth? Mary Alice?
So I have several questions about this, and then I have one question that you might not be able to answer, Elizabeth. So right now we're talking about increasing the proportion time for the Human Relations Officer to 1 FTE. And part of that is with recruiting expenditures. So we had originally budgeted about $10,000 for recruiting expenditures. It's been doubled to $20,000. 20,800 to be specific. Is that because we anticipate it being harder? What accounts for the increase?
So when you look at that recruiting line item in human resources, that's for all of our recruiting across the city. But we do think that this particular position may be somewhat challenging to fill. And so while we won't turn the whole process necessarily over to an outside firm, there are some parts of the process that we probably will need help with in order to be successful in finding a qualified pool of applicants.
So I know that we're being very specific in terms of replacing hires due to the budget. Do you have any estimate in terms of the number of positions that we are going to be replacing? Because that would be directly related to the amount with the recruiting expenditure.
Right. So, I mean, that's hard to answer because I don't know how many positions will become vacant throughout the year. We do have several positions that are vacant that we are holding open, but what we're finding as we go through the year and as vacancies occur is that in many cases we're just so thinly staffed already that it's difficult to kind of keep up with the basic day-to-day work that we do without filling some positions.
And I guess my question is that it sounds to me like the justification for doubling this amount right now is for that hire for the human resources, because if we don't really know if we're going to backfill any positions that leave, it's hard to estimate how much money would be needed for the recruiting.
Right. So we budget kind of a standard amount to cover most of the recruitments that happen throughout the year, but this one is just kind of unique. We don't often use outside recruiting services, but I think for this position and the other one that we may consider it for is for the Public Works Director.
Okay, and then there is a salary. These numbers are very small. I'm assuming that the line item for Human Relations Officer was originally budgeted at approximately 42,000, and that's just been doubled to 84,000 for the actual salary. Is that
correct?
The justification for that?
Correct.
All right. And then this is the one that I'm not. Okay. One other thing in the Human Relations Officer, it says and perhaps one additional position. Is that in the Human Relations Office, or is that just any position within the city?
So the one in particular I was thinking of was the Public Works Director there. And that is budgeted, that recruiting expense is budgeted not in the Human Relations budget, but in the Human Resources budget.
Okay, and this is the question that you might not be able to answer. I'm not sure if Diane can answer it. So we budget a certain amount, currently $2,000 for a hearing officer. To increase that to $10,000. So it sounds to me like a hearing officer is not somebody who's in-house, it's somebody that we hire to conduct those hearings. Is that correct?
Correct. We use an attorney who is not an employee of the city who comes in and officiates at the hearings.
And do you know if those hearings are public?
So the meeting itself is public, but typically I think much of the meat of it would happen in closed session. I think Carol maybe has something to add there.
Well, one of the things that might interest you all is that we are working right now with the CPRB as we're scheduling this grouping of hearings that we have to work with the particular appellant to see if we might pilot what has been suggested to open those hearings up rather than have them required to be closed. So if this individual is amenable to that, I will probably be bringing to you I guess it would be an ordinance that would suspend the requirement of the CPRB ordinance that the appeal hearing be closed if the parties agree. So that would be something that we're considering piloting, and on a limited basis just to see what it's like. But that's what we're trying to do. But in general, it's mandated by the ordinance to be closed.
Okay. All right. And I guess my third is just, well, I'll wait for discussion. So thank you very much for the information.
Sharice, did you have a question?
I was just going to ask Carol, what, the meetings are closed based on what? Why are they closed?
It's the hearing itself is conducted in closed session. So the CPRB ordinance requires that to protect the privacy of the party who is complaining about, who has a complaint about the police. But there's a group of folks that have recommended some changes, and we thought we might pilot what it would be like to have a hearing in open session.
Okay. So they're just close to the public, but all of the parties that are involved are able to see who's who. Correct?
The way it would happen is not unlike what the council does, is you convene in an open session, but all the individuals who might be giving testimony are not necessarily visibly present. And then there's a motion to go into closed session for purposes of having a hearing. And then the board would convene in closed session and call upon first the appellant makes their case in closed session and the city and the police department are not present. And then after that happens, then the appellant is invited out of the room, and then the city makes their representations and so forth. And then the deliberations are also in closed session. Once a decision is made, then the board emerges back into open session and delivers their finding.
Okay.
I have a question for Elizabeth. With the human relations officer being full-time and then traditionally and then part-time and now full-time again, do you plan to take a look at the job description and update that at all? I know there has been discussion in the past that maybe we could be doing more enforcement of the human rights ordinance as far as more proactive enforcement of non-discrimination in housing and employment and things like that. That's part of the human relations officer's job, isn't it?
Right. And the job description is being reviewed. Yes.
And I can add to that. And that's exactly one of the reasons why it's being increased back to full time. We want to be more proactive and do more public, more outreach to the community as well, so that folks understand their rights and responsibilities, especially with respect to housing. And, that's one of the big issues, and employment. The other area that this person will be focused on is more inclusive hiring practices and that sort of thing. And there will be, a lot more activity in that area, and then supporting the Civilian Police Review Board as well. So, as well as the Human Rights Commission. And we'll be changing the title of this officer to probably Human Rights and Equity Officer. There's a lot of confusion right now between human relations and human resources. So we want to get away from that, that name being so close to human resources. And human rights and equity, I think, better reflects what this person actually focuses on.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Jared?
Elizabeth, someone had, I think Megan Miracle sent in an email question about making a comment about the rebudget police overtime training. But we're not adding any funds to that. We're actually rebudgeting funds from it to else, correct?
Right. That was a specific training that was planned at some point in the spring and didn't occur. So it's really just a timing thing.
Yeah, and that's just going to get put into the general fund, I'm guessing.
It's just going to get moved. Basically, it was in last year's budget. We're just reflecting it now in this year's budget when we realistically think they might have an option to do that training.
Oh, so it's being rebudgeted from last year's line to this year's.
Right, correct.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no other questions, could we have a motion?
Yeah, I'll do that. I move that we send ordinance 2020-08-041, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance. This is the budget amendment number 1, an omnibus amendment, forward to the City Council with the recommendation of approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved by Dennis and seconded by Bill Colebrook to send resolution number 2020-08-041 to City Council with a recommendation for approval. And just a reminder, in City Council, it will take 6 votes to pass, including the mayor. So 6 out of 8 at that time, we should all be back. And that's true of any budget amendment. When we passed the budget originally, it takes a majority vote, and then any amendment requires 6 of 8, including the mayor. So for this recommendation to council, could we have a roll call? Oh, Jared, did you have a question? Sorry, is there any discussion?
I was going to say there's discussion, but I did have a question for Elizabeth, I guess. Then, what was the training, the state required training? Do you know what it was?
I have some notes on that, but I don't recall at the moment. I can get that for you though and email you.
Okay. Is Chief, are you still here? There you are.
There we go. Coming back around. So this is the funding for the annual in-service training. Typically that particular training is divvied up into certain state required topics. That's where we do our implicit bias training every year. So half of the training has to do with classroom type topics, and the other half then usually has to do with some other physical skill. And so that's done usually every year in May-ish, June, but with the pandemic, we were unable to get the training accomplished this year, which is why this amendment has been, I guess, asked for.
Can I just follow up, Bill?
Yeah, go ahead.
So that's split in half between a physical training of some sort and the bias training?
Yeah, no, it's not exclusively bias training. That's one of the examples. There's some other things. Usually there's and I don't know off the top of my head, Jared, right now. It's usually some sort of legal update component to that. Like, this is the law. These are some of the things that have changed. There's been the bias training, and there's a couple other classroom sessions that escape me right now that we'll do within the classroom portion. And then the other piece of it, and that it kind of varies a little bit. I know that some years we spent 3 hours on one and 4 hours on the other, 4 hours and then 3 hours. It's roughly 50-50. Then the other half is usually some sort of other, whether it can be cuffing techniques or review of other protocols and things that are more physical in nature. And so those will occur usually in the second half.
Do you think we'd be able to get a breakdown of hours and trainings for the vote at council next week?
I believe the answer to that is absolutely yes. I'll have to go see if I can find the right lieutenant who has that information.
Okay, thank you.
Mary Alice?
So are all the patrolmen and the detectives and lieutenants required to go through that training each year, or is that something that's split?
No, this would be in-service training that all of the officers would go through. So from the chief to the newest patrol officer.
And who usually conducts those training?
It's a variety of, it depends upon the topic. So we've had trainings where we've had outside people come in. We've had the state's attorney's office provide training. We've had HR folks deliver some of the training. So it just sort of depends kind of on the topic.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this amount is pretty small. I have a question. Is this amount's pretty small, $5,000 or something, right? Is that
$5,250.
so?
Yes.
If that's overtime, that doesn't sound like a lot of hours for a lot of officers. Is there other non-overtime training we do? And even in the full budget, the training budget seemed, the line item for training seems pretty small compared to how much training must go on. How does that work?
So with regards to this particular session, and I honestly didn't know the exact number until you just said that. I thought it was going to be more myself, but I guess that's an Elizabeth question. Usually this type of training, when we do these what we call the annual in-service. So for the patrol officers, the guys and gals who work from the different shifts, they would be paid overtime for in an effort to sort of minimize some of the costs. The detectives and all the administrative staff, the SROs, now that we have those folks would all come on shift, so there wouldn't necessarily be overtime for those people to attend.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, then we can have a vote. Could the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
That motion carried. Thank you. So finally on the agenda, we have a discussion for public safety and policing, next steps and follow-up. Did we have any, who is going to lead that? Mayor?
I'll lead off with this. Thanks, Bill. As you remember from last week, I proposed formation of an advisory committee on public safety and policing. And this is in response to the many comments we've received over the past couple of months, the concern from the public and in general what's happening around the country. There's clearly an interest and clearly a need for some fundamental, some serious evaluation of our approach to public safety, what it means to be a safe and healthy community, and policing, and restructuring our response. And that's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to require a lot of thought in order to get from where we are today to a new way of doing things that's sustainable. So, we've got a number of things underway. I outlined those last week. Those will continue. And Jason, can you put up the slide I sent you? So over the past week, I've had conversations with staff, as well as I've heard from a couple of the city council members. So we're starting to flesh out a proposed structure for this. The advisory committee will be chaired by a community member, and I envision community members would be residents of Urbana, plus plus perhaps some non-residents if we need certain areas of expertise on this committee. I would think we could include, we wouldn't just be restricted to members or residents of Urbana. I'd want city council representation on this committee, just like we have city council representation on a number of our more important boards and commissions, as well as representation from Urbana Police Department management and patrol staff. City staff support will be primarily coming from the Human Rights and Equity Officer. This is the person to be hired, and this will be one of their major roles and responsibilities, as well as the Community Engagement Coordinator. We're in the process of narrowing down that pool of candidates to decide who we are going to interview for that, as well as city administrator and myself. As I've been thinking a lot about this and just going through all my notes and reflecting on what input we've received, I think probably the most important area that this committee should focus on in the coming year, and I'm looking at 2020 to 2021, taking this year by year because we can't do everything at once. One of the biggest requests and most recurrent requests is looking at reallocation of resources, or it's what most people are talking about when they talk about defunding the police, is thinking about what do the police do today, when that means we're going to have to analyze calls for service and really look in detail what Urbana Police Department does today. And we can't make generalizations. We have to focus on our department here in Urbana. What roles we want them to continue, what roles they should continue, and we're looking, that's primarily the obvious ones, or are responding to criminal activity, responding when there's clear danger involved, and then but there are other roles that they're doing now that other people or other agencies, other organizations may be able to do better, or there's different or better ways to respond. So we have to examine, calls for service, and what people are doing today, and what they could be doing in the future, or who is best suited to respond to some of those calls for service. So that, I think, is going to be, or should be, one of the major areas of focus for this committee. We'll also be looking at use of force review, and that's a more discrete task. I think that's something that can be done fairly efficiently, and the staff has already begun to look at use of force policy, but this committee also needs to be involved in that as well. And then there's been a call for looking at alternative models for civilian oversight and accountability. Our CPRB currently is an appeals board. There are other models. Those other models involve more resources, staff, and cost more, but we can evaluate the different types of models to see what works best for Urbana. And Carol Mitten's been in touch with an expert in this, and this person is willing to come and give a presentation and kind of get us started on that. So I think that's another area of interest that this committee can focus on. There's also been interest in looking more at root causes, looking at, from a proactive standpoint, what makes a safe community? Well, we know that secure housing does, that when you're not food insecure, when you have decent income, when you have good health care, when you have, safe, engaged neighbors, all those things build for a safe and healthy community. And those are long-term changes as well. But I think for the 2021 year, if we can focus on these three areas, we'll get a long way down the road toward where we need to be. But this is up for discussion, questions, comments, suggestions, and I just love some feedback.
Any
Oh,
comment?
and could I add one? Carol, is Carol still here? The other aspect of this, an approach to this, will be through our comprehensive plan and public engagement that's going to occur over the next couple of years. And Carol wanted to speak to that.
Yeah, I just want people to understand that, there's some high level topic areas that we that Andrea and Lily are working on in terms of ways to engage the public in these these broad areas. And one of them, even prior to this conversation, was about safe communities. And so we've already had some conversations with Andrea and Lily about how we can dovetail these efforts together. So from the community's perspective, it's all one effort. It's not two efforts that they don't understand the relationship. So we want that to all be integrated as well.
And I will remind folks that in 2 weeks, on August 17th, we'll have a presentation on the one-door proposal, which is the pilot approach to an alternative emergency response to calls related to mental health. And this is an excellent example of reallocating energy and resources from a strictly police response to one that's really a hybrid. There still will be necessity for police to be involved in a lot of times if there's a dangerous situation related to this, but it also will involve mental health professionals, case managers, and an alternative, really better type and better quality response to people who are experiencing mental health issues. So the one-door presentation will be in a couple of weeks, and I think that's going to be a major step forward as well.
Sharice.
Regarding the the chart that you had there, as far as an advisory board, another advisory board, I guess my question is, how do we engage? Is it going to be kind of like our commissions where we invite people to put in applications, so on and so forth? What happens if there aren't enough applications to go on with the advisory board, or what happens if there is an issue where one community is more represented than another on this advisory board? I mean, just getting citizens involved that represent more of Urbana than just a few.
Well, that's the key. Just for general knowledge, we have about 25 or 26 boards and commissions already, and I have about 165 seats that I have to keep filled, and it's a constant challenge to do that. We currently are interviewing for 2 vacancies on the Civilian Police Review Board. I now have 2 vacancies on the Human Relations Commission, and that's occurred in the last week or so. So we don't undertake forming an advisory committee lightly, because you're right, you're absolutely right. We have to find people to serve on this. We have to find a community member who's willing to chair it, because it should not be a city staff member or a city council member. This is a community-based advisory committee. We have to make sure we represent as a broad cross-section of the community as possible, and that people's voices who aren't being heard are heard, and particularly people who have who have been affected by policing in all its forms in Urbana, and people who are concerned in general about neighborhood safety. So it's going to be a real it's an important responsibility, and it's going to be a challenge, I think, that we need to take on to get this committee populated with people representing Urbana, all of Urbana. And then at the same time, we have to, that's one of the reasons we're going to use outside help to recruit human rights and equity officers. I want to get that position filled as soon as we can with the right person, so they can start taking on some of this work. And as we've said many times, Urbana is thinly staffed. We were thinly staffed before the pandemic. We still are. So this is not something we undertake lightly. But I think it's very important to do, and it's the kind of work that, as we said last week, we just can't do it in a city council meeting. So this has to take place outside council, so we actually get things done.
And if I could make one more maybe suggestion, is that we think about passing the torch. in the sense that this be something where we include high school students. They can learn about civic duties. They can learn about local government. They can also be prepared to be the next leaders of Urbana. I think this would be a great opportunity to help educate our new leaders that are being groomed or educated right now within. So maybe we need to think about some way to partner with District 116 and making it. I don't know if they do this with Urbana. They didn't do it when I was going to Urbana, but there generally there is there has been a requirement added regarding graduation that the seniors and juniors do community outreach or community work. Some kids work in homeless shelters, some kids work as in the hospitals. That this could be added to that particular type of curriculum if Urbana, if 116 has that.
I think that's a great idea. And in fact, we were talking about that just the other day with the comprehensive plan process. One of the first pieces of the whole process is going to be a kind of know your government or civic education 101. This is all the units of government in Champaign County. Here's how they spend your money, and show the interrelationship among that. So I've discovered over the, especially being in mayor, is that many people really don't understand who does what for them, and you know, they'll call my office about park district issues or something with the schools, and I have to explain, no, there's a separate governing board for each of those bodies. There's a separate taxing bodies, and so the civic education is incredibly important, and that's part of it. And you make a really good point. So yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Mary Alice.
So are you envisioning one advisory board with these 3 tasks for the next year? Is that the proposal?
I think we're going to end up with subcommittees or working groups, something like that. It depends on how they want to organize, get themselves organized. But the, you know, if you're looking at reallocation, police function, that's a big job. That's a big job that could take up the whole year itself. And I think in order to do it right, people need to be able to devote their full attention to it. The civilian oversight and accountability, that's more straightforward. Same thing with the use of force policy review. But I think we're looking at some subcommittees.
So you're proposing one overarching committee, and then they break off into 3 different kind of working groups?
Yeah. And they may decide to add a few people for the working group depending on the areas of expertise that they need.
So one thing that I am a little concerned about is the office that would run this is currently not a filled position. And I think that we need to start the process sooner rather than later. So I guess what I'm saying is that it would be good if we have to establish this with an ordinance. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So if we work to establish the ordinance and then start filling those seats, meanwhile, at the back of it, we're recruiting for the position. Hopefully they can hit the ground running and we can move forward with this faster rather than waiting for the position to be held and then having.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I see these things kind of happening in tandem, and there's some groundwork being done now internally in terms of looking at, first of all, there's the annual report from the police department. That will be that'll come out soon. That'll be the basis in terms of the wealth of information in terms of calls for service and who's doing what, and so that'll form the basis for this. In the meantime, so in the meantime, we can start to get some of that stuff done while we are recruiting for the position.
So we have the general constituencies or the general groups of people that would be represented. Do you have like a number in mind that you're thinking the advisory group would be?
We had an initial number of 11 people total, just to keep it manageable. But what I need your help on is who, who, and suggestions from council and the community on who would be well suited to serve on this panel. And it is a commitment. It is a commitment. So.
Okay. All right.
Dennis?
Yes, I was wondering about the number of people that were going to be taken on to the commission, the advisory council. 11 seems a little small to me, especially considering that there might be 3 different topics of inquiry to follow through on. Each one could be pretty detailed. And I don't know how representative of the community we can be if there's only 11 aspects of the community represented. And one of them is, some of them are staff and some of them are, one's a city council member, one's a police representative. It only leaves about 4 or 5 positions that are truly community oriented. So I don't know. I mean, it would seem to me that you might want to consider a larger group than just 11.
Well, that's why if you have a working group focused on one of these topics, you probably have other people. There would be other people involved.
You mean you would add subcommittees from outside of the working group itself?
Or they could seek, yeah.
Oh, I see. Well, that would help certainly solve some of that problem. Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Jared?
So one question that just came up, I've got a couple, and I guess I don't know the answer to it because at least on the 2 committees I've served on, there have not been any staff. And I just want a clarification. That staff that's listed on there, they're in support like they are in any other, they're not voting members of the committee.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So.
Yeah, each committee like this, or many of the boards and commissions, you've got admin staff working behind the scenes, and that's not even listed here, but you've got people working behind the scenes for scheduling, taking minutes. These would be public meetings. They'd have to be recorded. These are, this would be treated like any other board and commission in terms of the Open Meetings Act and public meetings and that sort of thing. And then between meetings, there's going to be work that has to be done by staff members to keep things going. So yeah, They would not be voting members of a committee. They would be supporting the work of the committee.
Right. What about the mayor?
I support everything.
Well, voting member or no?
No, I would not be a voting member.
So it would just be potentially out of our current municipal body, one council person would be the only person from the city actually as a voting member on that board. It's possible there would be a council member on one of these working, subcommittees. Yeah,
someone was particularly interested in reallocating, defunding resource, the department. I know some folks are particularly interested in use of force, so there's that option too.
Sure. Just offering as clarification for Dennis and Sharice talking about how many people from the public, because it would be one council member maybe, and then 10 people from the public.
Well, you'd have representation from the police department.
As a voting member?
Yes, yeah, as part of this committee, working committee, yep.
Okay. Generally speaking, did you read Durrell's email from last Thursday?
I did.
Did you have any thoughts on his first 4 criticisms that he offered in that email about the difficulties we might have and kicking the can down the road and all that?
Well, I don't intend to kick the can down the road. I did agree with him on some things. For one thing, traffic stops doesn't need to be part of this. We will deal with traffic stops in city council, and I think we can move forward on that. School resource officers, we're not going to have a discussion in this subcommittee. That largely is a policy decision to be made, to be a policy decision to be made by the school district. We currently have an agreement with the district, but the major discussion there is going to occur at the school board and not at the city council. There's a great deal of interest from the public in various models of civilian oversight and accountability. He's right. The other approaches are more resource intensive, but people seem to want to have a discussion about the options, and we'll have a discussion and you guys should know what the alternatives are. So
sure. I just wanted to know if you had seen it. I thought
I read it. I read everything I get. Yes.
He had illustrated some good concerns, because I was certainly not considering some of them before he wrote them out, and considering doing this versus what are our alternatives. And I certainly would agree that a bunch of the things that he listed are things that we should be able to take actionable maneuvers or positions on now. And we don't need a board to do that, but certainly some of the bigger things we will need something beyond that. So creation is by ordinance, right?
Correct.
And that's how we've done all of our other boards and commissions. At some point in time, they were created by an ordinance passed by council.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So I guess, do we have a working document or anything to offer thoughts and suggestions, or to see what's under consideration currently, or what's being proposed for this?
An ordinance?
Yeah. Well,
no, it's not there yet. We're still needing, we're still fleshing out some of the structure here. I want to try to keep this as simple as possible and straightforward. So that's my goal here.
I understand. I guess I'm asking because I'm curious about, I had an issue brought up to me that I really am concerned about, and that is like, what actionable power does this committee end up having in the end?
This committee is an advisory committee. The actions would be taken at the city council level. So they would be advising, they would serve as advisory to me and you.
Okay.
So
kind of in the same way the ZBA works, or something along those lines, where they have a vote and they bring something forward to us, and then we debate it all over again after they've done the hard work.
It wouldn't be quite like the Plan Commission or the ZBA or something like that. I'd have to these are advisory. This is an advisory committee.
I get it, and that's why I'm trying to get at the philosophical idea behind it, because if the end result is that I don't know, a report comes out or something, and then council's got to approve it and then vote again to make anything that it suggests a reality, then we're like just adding that many more steps, and it's got to go through council again anyway, which is kind of what Durrell was getting at in that email of like, if we end up having to do it in council anyway, we ended up having to vote on it again anyway, then what was the point of doing it in the first place? I get it. I'm just
the point of doing it outside of city council meetings is that this is going to take a considerable amount of work and time, and we simply do not have time in a council meeting to spend hours and hours looking at police calls for service and hashing out some of this stuff. And we really need to do that outside of the council meeting. And I strongly believe that, it needs to have some community involvement as well, because that's what that's what's missing, or what we haven't had as much of right now. So the but ultimately the vote and the action and the actionable items, that action has to be taken by the city council. You're the only ones with that authority to do that.
Yeah, I get it. I'm just brainstorming this idea because Joel really put my brain in a pickle on it, because I'm like, well, if it ends up having to come back to us again anyway, and we've got to debate it and we've got to go over it, then, and I get, we can't,
well, hopefully it will come to you in such a clear and well thought out product that it won't require hours and hours and hours of debate. You'll be able to evaluate something and go from there. Carol, comment?
I just wanted to interject that was something important that you should keep in mind that's likely to come out of this are things that require resource reallocation or new funding. And so the advisory committee wouldn't have any authority to decide how the city's funds are going to be spent. And that's going to be an important role for the city to make choices about how funding is allocated, and or things, things have been suggested. I think about some of the suggestions about changing the model for the CPRB that need to be reflected in the collective bargaining agreement. They have no role in that either. So, I think it's a natural thing that it would have to come back, and not that you're going to debate the merits necessarily, but you're going to say, okay, well, where are the funds going to come from, or how are we going to accomplish this? That's how I would see the role being. It's not redundant. It's you have a different role in extending the recommendation and making it a reality.
Well, redundancy is inherent in bureaucracy and inherent in municipal government, whether we like it or not. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes we need redundancy and multiple eyes to look at things. But I get what you're saying. Yeah, that there's mechanisms of authority that are not going to be embedded within whatever this body is to make some of those things happen. I just want us to be cognizant of not putting ourselves in the position of needing to rehash, separately amongst us. And I don't know if that comes through providing consistent reporting or consistent updates from what's going on with the commission and stuff like that. I mean, I'm just trying to, we don't want to hear from them in 3 months and then they give us a litany of things and we're like, oh man, okay, now we're going to go through all these different things, even though I might be one of the people who's doing that. I'm just worried about that. So
that's one of the reasons to have city council representation on this, because you can, number one, keep people focused, people can stay focused on the task. Number two, it can be reported to council on a regular basis, progress report, or get feedback and make sure you're heading in the right direction. So it's important to have a link between this committee and the council, and that is the council member or members.
Okay. Oh, see if there's any other questions before I ask anymore.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, Dennis.
All right, so I just want to mention something else that is kind of coming through in the background here. Sri Sarisi sent to us a resolution about ending and addressing systematic racism and achieving racial equality that had been drafted in Evanston, Illinois. So, okay, so she took the energy to, put that forward as something for us to consider doing. Because the resolution was based entirely on realities in Evanston, Illinois, I volunteered my energy to redraft it as a resolution that the city of Urbana might adopt. And I've sent that out to individuals in the city council looking for feedback. And I've received feedback from 2 different individuals. And I'd like to get feedback now in public session. If anybody here feels like this is a useful thing to do, as a general overarching statement of our intent, realizing that there's a lot of work to do specifically to achieve it.
Well, Dennis, I appreciate you doing that. I actually, that was something that, this particular resolution was something that was pointed out to me by Carol Ammons. And, I read it and I thought, wow, it seems like this is something, I think it's, my thought on it was just that as a very good first step in a forward position regarding how the city of Urbana deals with and acknowledges that there is a systematic type of racism within many city governments, and if not codified, then at the very least it's been practiced, and that we as a city need to make it plain and very simple, to just be, blunt about that, that we are a city that is not, that is working toward, and we do not agree, nor do we wish to practice that type of a government or governance. And so she Carol, that is, led me to that link, and I think that it would be a very good first step at adapting, to adapt or adopt something to that effect. I haven't been able to go over your draft of your rewrite yet. I only got to it today earlier, and but I'd like to discuss it with you further after I read it and see if, I think as a group we could actually come up with something that's that would work for the city of Urbana.
I know that
It sounds like there's support for it, Dennis. How about if I haven't had a chance to look at it very closely either. I think you just sent yesterday. If we send you our suggestions and comments this week, then it sounds like there's support to put it on the agenda for the committee of the whole in 2 weeks.
Sure, that's great. I would appreciate feedback. And already I realize that some of the recommendations in the therefore section might be changed because they may not actually be, well, I don't know. We have to discuss, how to formulate what we want to actually say about therefore. But I think that the whereas section is pretty strong and good. And it would be good. I think it would just be a good statement from the city council about direction without really fleshing out how the direction can be achieved yet, because obviously the mayor's task force will do that.
Sounds like it'll be a good foundation for both the committee and for the comp plan, because that should be the base, one of the fundamental principles behind the comp plan going forward.
Right. So
but you need to be cautious about working on this outside of a meeting for Open Meetings Act
Everyone
considerations.
send Dennis your comments, and Dennis, if you and Sharice want to meet, you can meet with her, but don't say who sent what. You have a document you can work on with one other person, but you can't talk about who suggested what.
So that's fine with me.
And if you could, when you get it done, can you send it on to us so we can make sure formatting is appropriate for a resolution?
Having used a template created by our previous city clerk, I think I'm pretty safe, but I certainly shall do that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so Dennis, yeah, I'm more than willing to work with you on this, mainly because it was my idea. I think I should be working with you on this.
You have no choice, Sharice.
I don't have a choice, but But that's not the point as much as it is. There should be input I think if you know, if anyone's going to have some input, I'm the one that could have some. I
So
think.
when it's brought to the city council committee of the whole, then it becomes a document that can be shared by everybody. And you know, I mean, first of all, we have to have it has to be put together in a thoughtful manner. But once that's done, then it's open to total review by the public and staff and
We
whomever
can
else.
only tear it apart and rewrite it at that point, but
Right.
at least then we have something to look at and talk about.
Yeah.
Jared?
Just to go back to this task force committee, advisory committee. I got me saying that word, Dennis.
Sorry.
I'm curious about, due to the unique mission of this particular committee, and what resources outside of staff are possible to be dedicated to it. You know, I'm thinking if this committee comes to the conclusion that it needs to ask the city for money to, you know, hire a consultant of some kind, or needs to use resources to help organize community meetings, community outreach, those kinds of things. What's your initial reaction on budgetary resources for this? Are we going to create a budget item for this committee? Or
Yeah, you're gonna need there needs to be a budget for this committee, and our initial discussions have some compensation for the community members on it.
Gotcha.
Low compensate, but some, you know, just to compensate folks for their time.
And
so yeah, this won't happen without spending some money.
Sure. And I'm glad to hear that, because that's what I was thinking about more and more as I kept thinking about the depth of work that would be going on, is that it's going to require real financial resources to actually get anything done. And then what about time frames for meetings? Obviously, because this isn't something that I don't think like it can operate like most of our commissions with a once a month basis. I think it's probably got to be every other week, twice monthly. I might be ambitious in that, but that's, you know, just my initial reaction thinking about it, due to the necessity of the work that needs to be done and getting it done quickly and as appropriately as possible. And anybody who's going to be on something like this, I think, would want to dedicate that kind of time to it. Or is that something we'll have to debate in an ordinance when it comes to council, as far as that's concerned, or do you guys already have an initial?
I don't have a meeting schedule in mind yet. I think part of that is up to the committee, you know.
So they would set their own schedule?
Well, we might. I mean, that's something we'll probably try to work out by the time we bring the ordinance or the resolution for you guys.
Okay, because that was just one other thing that I was thinking of. And then I heard we'll have another thing in, just moving quickly, just off topic real quick, that we'll have something in 2 weeks at the next committee of the whole, police related. And last meeting we had talked about, you thought that we had something every meeting police related for all of August. Do we know what's coming up for next week?
We have.
Because if not, I have plenty of discussion items to offer.
We did have some. I don't have the list in front of me right now. I know on the 17th we have one door. We have.
Yeah, in 2 weeks we've got one door.
Right, on the 17th.
Okay.
We'll get you that list though.
Okay. Obviously we want to do it as soon as possible so we can get it on there. I just want to make sure we've got a topic on for next week, because there's plenty of things still to talk about and take action on. Those were all my initial questions, but I guess I just wanted to ask overall what methods we should use to be passing along information about this. Just sending you emails on this topic is the best way to forward information and ideas.
I'm sorry, passing information on.
To you guys as you're thinking about the ordinance and disseminating it to
Yes. Yeah.
council. Just send it to you and Carol.
Send it to me and put advisory committee in the subject line so we can keep those filed all together.
Okay.
I had a couple questions. So some of the review of our recommendations on use of force. I know Chief Serafin's already committed to including de-escalation and the use of force policies. There's no reason why that can't go ahead and be done while they're talking about this. And some of the responsibilities can actually be done through the CPRB under our current ordinance. Is your thought that they have their hands full, that for some reason they don't want to advise us on this, or that it's going to be changed so much that won't be part of their responsibility going forward? I mean, they do have the ability to make recommendations under our ordinance now. So
on use of force.
Yeah, well, on any policing issues, I think is the way, I forget exactly how it's phrased in the ordinance, but they can make recommendations on police policies. I don't know if that's recommendations to us or recommendations to the chief, but they aren't, people keep saying they're simply a appeals board, but that's not, if you read the ordinance, there are parts of the ordinance that allow them to make recommendations. Carol?
Since I've been working with them rather closely, if you would like me to inquire of the co-chairs if they were to take that on, when they think they could fit it into the schedule, so that you'd have a sense of, if they did take it on, how quickly could they turn it around. I'd be happy to do that.
Well, and I think just getting some input from them on this this advisory committee might be helpful too.
Sure.
And then my other question was, are you envisioning this as an ongoing committee or something that has a beginning and end? I know at least for the IDOT traffic study task force, we set a time period when I think it was 18 months or something, they had to be done and give us a report, and then that committee went away. Is this something you think will continue?
I think it can. I think it's the sort of thing that should go year to year, depending on how much gets done and what. This is not going to be done in a year. That's for sure. So I think this is something that, but we need to bite things off and things we can chew. And this year, I think the focus has to start on looking at the three areas that we have here.
Okay. Bill, did you have a question, comment?
Yeah, just to comment on what you said about the like a terminal date. I mean, I think these issues are so big. I think it would be unwise to set an end date because I think depends on the issues that the committee gets into. They may be rushed. There may I think it'd just be wise to keep it open-ended for now. And like the mayor said, just make it year to year. Take a few things, bite off what they could chew, and then work on that, and then keep on working. Because I think it just gives maybe false hope, or maybe a bad product if there's an end date and they're trying to get stuff done, trying to meet just a deadline.
Mary Alice?
Sorry. I'd like to offer kind of a hybrid solution to that, which would be, public safety is something that we hope to always be revisiting and always be refining and making better for our community. But I do think that it is good for us to have specific goals for a year
So what I would like to see is for us to come to some kind of consensus that we want the advisory committee to give us advice on changes that we need to be doing this year. And then at the end of the year, saying what changes they feel would be a good next step. And then city council can discuss and say the next year, year two, we're going to focus on this. So the advisory committee would continue with a little bit of guidance from city council each year in terms of what the focus should be.
Jared?
I totally hear that, Mary Alice. So I feel like, to illustrate to you, Bill, what I foresee coming out of something like this is that I feel like it could end up in the creation of, for example, a whole new department within the city that serves, you know, like a one-door purpose or an alternative to police response purpose, even if that actually turns into, as we've discussed loosely, you know, a county-wide resource that's collaborative amongst all of the departments, because it would be very hard to do something that unique all by ourselves and not without the coordination of other emergency responses and other resources available in the county if we were the only people who were offering a mental health response specific unit or, you know, alternative unit that might be hard for us to fund by ourselves. But that's one reality that could come out of it, you know. And so there you've got that work done. The other reality that I could see coming out of it is, you know, that we ultimately end up being, because as Diane mentioned, there's probably not, the appeals board is probably not the way that we want to do police accountability and oversight. And, you know, I foresee the CPRB being dissolved and a new, more enforceable commission being created out of the idea of that. And that ends up being, you know, maybe a larger body, maybe it becomes a permanent board or whatever, that, and they only focus on the police issues that this advisory committee does initially, but then the creation of that new board, permanent board with those review powers, ends up taking that on, and they take on all of the individual aspects, like, you know, consistent quarterly reviews of use of force and all the different things that come with that. So, you know, I don't know that if in our initial creation of it we need to outline that it, you know, has any sort of permanence, because I foresee it being the vehicle to create those more permanent parts to either a new department within the city or a new commission that actually has the authorities and oversight that the city or and our citizens are looking for.
Okay, any other comments and suggestions? Okay, if not, I guess if you think of something or other questions, just contact the mayor. Any final thoughts? Okay, Jared.
Just want to say for next week, I'll have plenty of things to offer for that meeting, Diane, if we don't already have something scheduled to come up. So just let me know.
Okay. Or if you want to send, why don't you just send them along?
Okay.
So
Happy to
we
do
can
so.
have them.
Okay.
Okay, seeing no further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.